Okay. Hello and welcome to our next virtual author visit at the Westbury Memorial Public Library. I'm Michelle Marcus, the reference librarian and your host. Most of you have been here, but if you haven't been here, just a reminder again for you to be on mute. And then after the interview, when it's question and answer time, you select the raise hand button, and then you pick you to ask a question to our author, then of course to go off mute. And I'm excited to speak to author Lauren Rico. Let me share a little more about her. She's an award-winning author. Welcome. And she's also one of the top classical musical broadcasters in the country. Her voice has been heard nationally on Sirius XM and on radio stations in New York City, Charlotte, Connecticut, and Tampa. She's even been known to accompany travelers as they fly the skies as part of the in-flight entertainment on several airlines. When she's not talking on the radio or typing on her laptop, she enjoys puttering around the house with husband Tom and the rescue pup Sandy. Hello, Lauren, and thank you for agreeing to do this virtual author visit with the Westbury Memorial Public Library.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm so excited to discuss your book, Familia, such an enjoyable novel of great characters and twists. Can you please share a little about the book spoiler-free? This way we can give audience members who haven't yet read the book a little introduction to the book.
Yes, Familia is the story of a young woman named Gabby DeMarco. She is living in New York. She is a fact checker for a magazine in the city, and her parents have died like in the last year. She's like 25, and she's a little lonely for family. It was just her and her parents, and after they died, she feels kind of isolated. And so when the magazine that she works for runs a special story, the boss asks everybody in the office to do one of these like 23andMe ancestry DNA things because he's hoping that they will uncover something secret, that somebody will have this rare connection to like Meghan Markle or the Queen or something, or at the worst, maybe they'll be able to do an expose on the DNA, the ancestry DNA industry. So she does it, and she gets the results back, and she's really stunned because they don't match any of her history. It says that she's descendant of the Taino people who, were the original people of the Caribbean, the natives of the Caribbean, and a bit of Cuban and some things that just don't mesh because her father was Italian, her mother was Greek, and she wasn't adopted, so she doesn't know what she's thinking. Oh, it's a mistake. And no sooner is she kind of puzzling through this. She's had her results for like 5 minutes. When somebody messages her, as you can do with some of these services, when you find a match, a familial match, somebody messages her and says, a woman from Puerto Rico named Isabella messages her and says, I think you're my sister who was kidnapped out of her stroller off the streets of San Juan, Puerto Rico, 25 years ago. And that's kind of where this all begins. So you have Gabby in New York, who's, she's also kind of struggling in her job because she's a fact checker, but she wants to be a writer. She wants to be the one writing the stories instead of fact checking other people's stories. And she gets a lot of resistance because she's good at her job. And it would be a pain for her boss to put somebody else there, and he doesn't want to train anybody new, and it's that kind of thing. um so she's kind of frustrated. And so then there's this woman, Isabella in Puerto Rico, who's convinced that this is the sister she's been searching for 25 years. She's put out the feelers on all these different ancestry sites, and finally she's got a hit. And Gabby doesn't believe that she's related to Isabella. She thinks it's a mistake, but Isabella is so adamant that Gabby's editor he wants to follow the story, but he doesn't want her to do it. He wants to give the story to another reporter to do. And she's very grumpy about this and ends up quitting and running off. And she doesn't believe for a second that she's the missing baby because it just doesn't jibe with what she knows. And her parents aren't alive to question, but she wants the story. She thinks there's a story to be there. And she knows if there's anything she's good at, it's following the facts. And she feels like if she goes to Puerto Rico, she can meet this woman, they can do a DNA test like in person there, make sure the results are right, and that maybe she can help this woman figure out what really happened to her sister, and in the process maybe write a great story that her magazine will pick up, or a different magazine. So she wants to prove herself, and she's just frustrated and angry with the boss, and confused about everything that's going on. So, and then meanwhile, Isabella, like I said, she's been looking for 25 years. And I'm giving you, this is all, it's story information and it's pertinent, but it's not, these aren't spoilers or anything. This is kind of what you'll find in the first few chapters of the book. Um, Isabella grew up, mother died in childbirth and left a totally devastated father who had a terrible, took up drinking and drugs, and was checked out all the time because he found himself a widower, devastated. And with the mother died in childbirth with the second baby. So he had an infant and a toddler. And it was just, this was what Gabby's, rather Isabella's life became. And then her sister disappears, and the rest of her life she's living in the shadow of this child who disappeared, and having to be street smart and drag her father out of bars and all this stuff. And she grows up to be a really tough, street smart young woman. So when the two of these women collide, they're very different, but there are some things that are very much alike about them. The story isn't even really the mystery isn't even really, are they sisters? The mystery is how they got to the point that they're at. How, if they are sisters, how did they get separated? If they aren't sisters, how did this all get so confused? So that's kind of what we spend the book doing, going back and forth over these 25 years, from the day the baby disappears, from the time the father wakes up in an alley and the baby's stroller is gone, the baby is gone, he's been beaten up. And so we go back and forth between that day and today, which is the two women in current day trying to figure out what's happening in Puerto Rico, going around the island, talking to people, putting pieces together, talking to the police, and trying to figure out 25 years later what happened on that day. But like I said, we switch back and forth. So we're kind of figuring out little by little as they figure it out, we're seeing it all kind of unfold. So by the end, you've got the whole story, and hopefully at least some of it is a surprise. Although if you've read it, you may tell me that I know a lot of folks, myself included, we like to start sleuthing from the beginning, looking for the red herrings and remembering little things. So maybe you knew already toward the end what some of the twists were. I'd be curious to know that if any of you any of you saw it coming, because I work really hard to kind of plant all those twists and turns, and it's always fun to hear how people unravel them. So that's a long answer to that's the basics of the story.
Oh, thank you. And I was wondering if you could please share a little more about the themes of the book.
The themes of the book. Yes. So the big theme, well, the name of the book is Familia, so family. And what I really wanted to kind of capture was this idea that family is more than DNA. It's more than who you are, the family that you're born into. Because let's face it, we wouldn't necessarily pick every single member of our family if we had a choice. You get who you get. But there are people who become family, even though you have no blood relation, or perhaps you're adopted into a family, or your friends become your family, your extended network becomes a family. In this instance, a confluence of events transpires to bring a bunch of strangers together uh, um, in a single action that makes them a family to some extent. This disparate group of people in a non-traditional way, they're a family. So that's a big thing. Redemption is always a big part of my books. I'm a sucker for a redemption story. I like to see bad guys turn good, and or that you find there's a kernel of goodness there. I like to see the downtrodden find their way up, and so like with the father Alberto, he's in such a bad way at the beginning of the book, and he really does Isabella wrong through her whole life. His daughter, he's not there for her, but he couldn't be. He wasn't emotionally equipped for it. But by the end, we see him kind of come full circle and become the man that he was meant to be. So there's that kind of redemption there. And I always throw in a little bit of the woo-woo. There's a little bit of kind of magical. You've got a weeping Madonna in a church, and I've always got something just a little otherworldly, or faith-based, or just something to a little magical. I like to throw in. So those are the big, family is the big one, but also some redemption. And Isabella, she spends all of this time looking for her sister, and then when she finally thinks she's got her, she sabotages, she self-sabotages. She's waited all this time and she finally thinks she's found this woman, and then she almost does everything she can to upend it, because now she does, be careful what you wish for, you might just get it, right? So she's finally got it, and she doesn't know what to do, and she is remembering herself as a small child and thinking that she did something to set these events in motion, which she didn't, of course. But sometimes you look back with what was maybe the mind of a 5 or a 6 or a 7 year old, and if you remember your thinking back then, it didn't make sense. You don't have any maturity, you have no life experience, you don't know. So, but that kind of stays with her through her life, and there's guilt there as well. So some complex themes, but for the most part, stepping back to family and a good dose of redemption and some magic in there, I would say.
Oh, good. I was wondering, as the story takes place in Puerto Rico, I was wondering what kind of research, if any, you had to do for this book.
Well, my grandmother was born in Puerto Rico. And I had not, up until the point I wrote this book, I had not done my own ancestry DNA. So I figured I better do it, make sure. And I did. What I found out was that my family, I go back 69 generations to 245 AD and the Taino people in Puerto Rico. My grandmother was born there. My grandfather was born in Cuba, and left in the 1940s. And they ended up living in Puerto Rico on and off several times throughout my life. They moved back and forth. He went there for certain jobs, and he never did go back to Cuba. And Puerto Rico was like the closest thing to his homeland. It felt like home to him because so they're so close together, and also it's that kind of tropical vibe and the Spanish language and the food. So he fell in love with it, and so as a result, myself and my cousins, we spent a lot of years visiting, going back and forth and visiting Puerto Rico from the time I was very little. Um, and they lived here on Long Island for some time as well, and eventually ended up settling in Maryland, but not before going back and forth to Puerto Rico probably 6 times and living there for multiple years at a stretch. They both passed this last year in 2024 after 76 years of marriage. They died within 6 weeks of each other. So what I, as I was writing this book, I had kind of a realization that I had, for most of my life, seen Puerto Rico through the eyes of a tourist. I don't speak fluent Spanish. Um, and I would go there a lot. I'm in my 50s now, and I would go there as a teenager. Later, I went as a college student, and in my 20s and 30s, and I would bring friends and I would bring boyfriends. And it was always about going to the beach and touring the Bacardi factory and, doing all the touristy stuff and showing people all the touristy stuff. I didn't see it as my ancestral home. It didn't feel like that. But then when I did the DNA, and as my grandparents were getting older and my grandmother was kind of in the throes of dementia, and I realized how much time I had wasted not embracing that, which I think a lot of us do. Our parents pass, our grandparents pass, and how many times do you wish you had the time back to ask them like, oh, I wish I'd asked my mom that when she was here. I don't remember all the things she tried to tell me, and I didn't pay attention to the family trees and this cousin and this one's in the picture and all these things that I want to know now. So I do have regrets about that. And so when I wrote the character of Gabby, I wanted to maybe give myself a little redemption. I wanted to approach her character from the eyes of somebody who was seeing Puerto Rico for the first time, period, but also seeing it through the lens of somebody wondering, is this my story? Am I connected to these people and to this place? Is this my history and part of my legacy? So it was kind of a chance for me to reconnect with that. So the husband and I went last year for a visit. I still have some family there, and the book is set in some of the areas that my grandparents lived in and that I visited, and it was It's good to do that. And you know, like I said, we're considering maybe getting a place to snowbird or at least go down a couple of months out of the year after he retires just to get out of the cold. But I'm finding this newfound love and connection. I've now inherited my grandmother's Puerto Rican cookbook, all her recipes, and I'm kind of working my way through that and reconnecting. And I think it's important to say that it's never too late to find those connections. I'm a little bit ashamed of myself for not having done it sooner, but I also give myself grace knowing, you know what, at least I figured this out at some point and there's still time for me to kind of discover my roots and go digging. And I wish that they had lived long enough to see me do more of it, but I can honor them in this way by doing that.
That's really good. I like that. That sounds like that's also the inspiration, your story. I like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
So we're talking about the two characters, two very dynamic characters, Isabella and then Gabrielle or Gabby. And I just wondered what you wanted to convey with your two main characters in the story.
What I wanted to convey with them?
Yeah, like eat together or also individually with them.
I guess, you know, it was that it was this idea of you know not being able to some extent you can't escape your DNA, you can't escape. It's like it's no I mean I'm going to tell you it's not a big spoiler, I don't think, to tell you that in the end they are related, because again, that's not the mystery. The mystery is how they were separated in the first place, how they came together. That's the whole weaving of the story. Um, you know, and so it's the nature versus nurture is part of it, that they were separate and they lived very different lives, and could not have been more different, but in some ways are very much the same. And when they are together, and I think this happens a lot with sisters and family members, you know, couldn't be more different, and yet when you put them together, they fit, they click. They're two very different pieces of the same puzzle, and you know, their edges interconnect to make them fit. So it was kind of, you know, okay, so the nature part, how much alike are they? How different are they? Are they what they expected? Are they disappointment to one another? These two women, both so strong in very different ways. And there's there's a lot of confusion, a lot of confused feelings, a lot of resentment. I think Isabella realizes that Gabby had a really fabulous life where she struggled. Isabella had a lot of difficulties in her life. She overcame a lot, but she became a very strong, independent woman. Whereas Gabby had a lot. She was nurtured and adored and cherished her whole life and loved, and she was a confident woman, but not in the same way that Isabella was. You know, Isabella like had no doubt that she could do anything she wanted to, like you know, the tenacity of finding her sister. She was never, you know, going to give up. So, um, I think they fit together, but they're very different. And when they're together, you kind of see how they, especially by the end, you see how they fit together. And they also get to know one another. I think that's part of the nurture piece, that the more time they spend together, the more they realize how alike they are, because they get to understand one another. And I think that Gabby especially helps. Like I said, Gabby comes at Puerto Rico and this whole culture with these fresh eyes, these fresh, you know, new, everything is new. And I think Isabella finds it a little irritating, you know, like a kid who's, you know, a thousand questions all the time. Um, but I think that Gabby does help Isabella to stop and say, look at her father more objectively, and to look at where she is and what her life was, objectively. And together, it takes the both of them to make the entirety of their relationship, to make, they need each other to be whole in the end, is sort of how that works. They're flip sides of the same coin. And I don't know how many, you know, more trite key sayings I can throw in there, but that's pretty much how they are. They're very, you're right, they're very dynamic, but very different, and yet somehow very much the same.
Yeah, the word I kind of used when I was gonna say, which I didn't say, was compliment, like the personality and compliment.
Yes, that's exactly it. Yes, they complement each other. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they do. they do. They were fun to write. And I had a little bit of an issue when we went through the editorial process. The editor thought that the two women sounded too much alike. And I won't lie, my first draft, Isabella was very salty, very, very salty, a lot of salty language. And I had to go back and clean that up a bit because it made sense to me as I was writing it. That's how I heard her in my head. And they're like, you know, yeah, you need to find a way to be, because language can, that kind of language, it can be a crutch too in creating a character. You have to find ways to kind of convey that edge without resorting to profanity. It's lazy. So it was interesting. Then I had to really think about um, how to make them sound different because when you have two, yeah, they're 5 years apart. Um, but you know, women in a certain age, 25 to 30 is actually pretty close in maturity level, I think. And so where their experiences were very different, their voices were very similar. And I kind of had to really go in and make Isabella a little more street smart, a little more edgy, without dumbing her down in any way. But just, you know, I needed to do more to kind of separate them because you can see how it could very easily, and did at one point, they kind of just sounded too much alike. They were like this, they sounded the same, like the same person saying two different things. So I had to kind of figure that out. It's one of those writer things that sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
And we had some other characters that are really interesting. Like who were your favorite characters to rate?
I loved well, Isabella and Gabby, I loved really, really small character El Viejo, the old man who is in La Perla. La Perla is the Pearl, and it's a real neighborhood just outside of Old San Juan, very touristy area. I enjoyed them. I enjoyed Detective Alvarez a lot. Miguel Alvarez. He's the young, well, not young at that point. He's a detective at that. I'm thinking of him as young because if you see behind me, I have After the Ocean is my latest book, and we have some crossover. It is not a sequel, but Detective Alvarez and Detective Rania, they do make appearances in After the Ocean. It's sort of the same world. You don't hear anything about the girls or anything like that, but those characters do kind of cross over. So I enjoyed them enough that I wanted to bring them back. But Rania was fun. The dad, Alberto, was fun because that goes back to my obsession with redemption. I wanted to see him grow and you know, I wanted to I get a lot of satisfaction out of seeing these because sometimes people write writers write characters like that and they're kind of flat, they're black and white. There's not a lot of dimension. And people are not black and white. They're not flat one dimensional. We're three dimensional. And at times we are sometimes you're good, sometimes you're not, sometimes you're strong, sometimes you're weak, and we go through, hopefully you go through an evolution throughout the course of your life. And so I had a lot of fun with Alberto, even though you don't see much of him. This Alberto's the father, so you know, you see him, he's our very first character, he's the prologue character, and then he doesn't pop up again really until the very end. And you see him 25 years later, what has happened. So he was a fun one to write. And oh, Beatrice, I love them all. I love them all. And Sister Blanca, they were very complimentary. I thought at one point I described them as I think it was Blanca who says that, you know, they were close. I almost made them sisters. I almost made them real life sisters. And I said that was just, it was too much with the sister thing. So they were friends, but how they had been friends and how Blanca became the bride of Christ as a nun and Beatrice became I think I said the whore of Satan or something, you know, something really like that to kind of juxtapose the two of them. So I I have a good time writing pretty much all the characters that I write because I try to make them all three-dimensional and quirky. I'm all about the quirk because people are, again, people are quirky. They have idiosyncrasies. These are the things that you might think of if you met this person for 5 minutes. There might be something that stands out. You know, so I try to give all of them, even the husband Mateo, who I was thinking about Mateo today and thinking, wow, he's just way too much of a nice guy, but I just don't care. I wanted a good, I'm tired of these bad husbands in books. I'm tired of the and in TV shows. I wanted a good supportive husband, you know. I wanted to put a guy who supported his wife and was understanding. So pretty much all of them is the long answer there. I enjoy writing all of them. They were all fun crafting. And honestly, um, they kind of develop as I write. There are twists in that book that I didn't see coming. I'm writing. I tell people this a lot. I'm like, I'm typing. I'm like, oh, what? What? No, really? Like, no, that. So there are things. The characters they take on a life of their own, and the more you write them, the more they kind of unfurl. For you on the pages and twists and turns and things they do and say kind of just they naturally progress as you write. At least that's my process. So they're kind of fun to write that way.
They're definitely like very memorable, like, fun characters to read about as well. And what you're saying about like redemption of characters, like I'm kind of like a sucker for the redemption arc, like the troubled character and then they get their redemption and the kind of like gray type of characters. They're not really bad, they're not really good. It's just kind of, they go on their redemption arc. I love that. I don't know.
It's satisfying, it's satisfying because these are tough times. People are just generally angry for different reasons. I think we're really tired as a society, and I I choose kindness. That's my mantra for 2025. I choose kindness. I'm going to be nice to everybody. I'm going to be kind and forgiving, or at least, God, I'm going to work at it. Um, because I believe people are inherently good and want what's best. I don't think very many people are actually bad people. So this is something that I try to capture in the characters, but there's something so satisfying about, a character that you're like, oh, he's just terrible. And then you find out why he's terrible, and there's more you look back because I think that's something too that comes with age and perspective. Um, if there are young people in your life, children, grandchildren, whoever, young colleagues, there I find and myself looking back at that time, I remember myself to be very quick to judge and very knee jerk. They're good, they're bad, this is right, this is wrong. It was very clear cut for me way back then. It wasn't until I had some life experience under my belt that I could look back and say, well, why did this person do that? What circumstances, made this happen? It's and things are never as simple as you think they are when you're young and you're not fully cooked yet. You don't have the life experience to know that things people become different things over the course of their lives as they're influenced by the people around them and the circumstances that they experience throughout their lives. So yeah, redemption's a good one.
What did you want your readers who didn't know much about Puerto Rico go into his novel to learn about this great place? Because I felt like Puerto Rico really came to life, like for me, like I've never been there, and just like all the descriptions and everything, the food, the sights, just
Oh
everything.
yeah. Yeah. Um, I tried to approach it so that Puerto Rico is almost a character instead of just being a backdrop. I wanted it to come to life. I've gotten a little bit of pushback because some people they weren't thrilled with how I portrayed La Perla specifically. Um, and I've tried. It's hard. You can't really explain yourself to trolls because they're going to beat you over the head with whatever you say. Uh, but I was very careful with the research I did and the events that take place in La Perla. At the time the baby goes missing, that was the 90s, and it was kind of like the Wild West there then, and it was very much a don't the police had an attitude of keep it in La Perla, and you do what you want, we won't bother you, you don't bother the tourists as long as your activities stay in this, because it's a teeny tiny little area. I don't even know that it's a square mile, tiny 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 area. um so things were really tough. And even now, if you go to some of the government websites for tourists, they warn you that La Perla is not policed. You don't want to necessarily be there after dark, right? But it's, that's what I would say to any person traveling to a city that they're not familiar with. I wouldn't be walking around in a strange area at night, if I was unfamiliar with it, and maybe if I didn't speak the language, that kind of thing. But that was a part of it. But I wanted to bring to life that these people are really extraordinary. They're just an amazing bunch of folks, the Puerto Rican people. The culture is just so rich. I mean, it's just, it's all there. It is that beautiful. It is that beautiful. You get off the plane and it's like, the salty breeze is everywhere. Everything is lush. The flowers are big and bright with the waxy green leaves. And it's just the beaches are white and stunning. And, there are good and bad people ever, grumpy people. Just it's the normal complement of human beings you're going to have there. But overall, they're like so happy to have people come and visit. They're so happy to share this culture with anybody who cares to go and visit. And it's so vibrant. The music, the art, they've embraced it. And the island is not very big. You could drive the perimeter of the island probably in 4 or 5 hours, I would say. But it's got mountains. It's got a desert, like a dry forest. It's got valleys. It's got the beach. It's got these ruins, and it's got caves and bioluminescent bays that glow at night. So it's just this absolutely stunning, and it's part of the US. You don't even need a passport to go there. It's just so beautiful. I wanted to convey the beauty of it, and it just tickles me every time I see a review or a comment where somebody says, "Oh my God, I want to go," or "I can't wait to go," or "This sounds like a spectacular place." That's what I wanted. I wanted it to be sort of my love letter to Puerto Rico and the Puerto Rican people, and to try and just show just how stunning it is. And it's part of us. It's part of the US. It's part of our culture. And it's just really gorgeous. I highly, highly recommend a visit there if it's something that you'd be interested in.
Sounds great. Let's see. Oh, how did you decide to become a published author? Can you share a little bit of your journey?
I didn't really decide to. So as you mentioned in the opening, my career, I'm a classical music radio DJ. If you listen to classical music at all, I can be heard on WQXR out of New York City on the weekend evenings. I used to do overnights there. Out of WSHU, out of Sacred Heart University, they're like an NPR station. You might catch them from across the sound. I do classical music in the afternoons and evenings for them. I'm also on the air for stations in Tampa and just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. And that all started because I have a master's degree in the French horn, of all things. Let me see, there's a picture, horn there. That's a horn there. Because I was going to be principal horn of the New York Philharmonic. That was my plan. Unfortunately, I was not very good, at least not good enough to do that for a living. But I kept getting these radio jobs along the way to support my pipe dream of being a horn player. And I got better and better at the radio and realized that I could get jobs. I loved it. I could find places to play on the side. And eventually I'd stopped playing altogether, but built this great, I'm 35 years into this career now and love it. So that's the trajectory. I never intended to write. Okay, the closest I got to it was if you do listen at all, or if you've ever heard somebody do that kind of radio, we tell little stories about the composers and try to give you tidbits of information that might make the music more interesting as you listen. Kind of bring these old dead guys, make them more current to you, like, so you understand them a little bit and the time they lived in, things like that. So I did have many, many years of that, kind of getting to the kernel of a story and a character. I always say that's kind of how I honed this skill. I didn't even know I was doing it. So about 10 years ago, I had a really rough patch. My mom died very unexpectedly. And then, like 4 months later, I had a breast cancer diagnosis. And I'm just prone to depression. It's a familial trait. And that just really sent me into quite a bad spiral. And I was having just a really bad time of it. Actually, I was traveling, and I called my therapist, and I was having a meltdown. And he said, "All right, you got to get out of the hotel. Just grab your laptop, go to the coffee shop, go sit in a coffee shop, get out, do some people watching, um, why don't you, I think I'd said at one point, oh, I wish I could write a novel or something. He's like, you said once you wanted to write a novel. Why don't you go sit and just write a conversation or something? And that is exactly what I did. I started writing what became Reverie. This book, I just kept writing and writing and writing and writing. It became a book. And then I wasn't done. So then it became Rhapsody, and then it became Requiem. Sorry, moving to. So I wrote this trilogy through this, like, I'm going to say it was about 18 months, maybe, as I was kind of processing grief and depression. It was a way to kind of put all of that in there. And then when I was done with that, it was like, hey, people kept telling me, you're pretty good at this. And so I had a real editor look at it who said, hey, you're pretty good at this. And so I started looking for agents and things, and I ended up self-publishing that trilogy. But then I found my way into I worked with an independent editor to help me edit those books, and she happened to work for a small publisher called Entangled, and they do romance primarily. And she said, they're looking for some romance. Would you consider writing romance? And I'm not a romance reader, really, but I thought, how hard could it be? Right? Not easy, but also the nice thing about writing romance is if what bothers you about romance is that it's formulaic, well, that's what makes it like it was a really good training tool for me because you have all the beats, the meet cute when they meet, and the dark moment when all is lost, and the grand gesture when, he or she like tries to win the person back, and then the happily ever after. So I didn't have to worry too much about plotting because I knew I needed all those elements. So because that was kind of off the table, I spent all this time kind of honing my skill with dialogue and setting and pacing and making these characters deep and not just all the things that people get kind of snobby about with romance, these flat characters. And, I wanted, if I was going to write romance, I was going to write good romance. So I started doing that and started, I came up with a couple of other books there, and then wrote a whole series of these small town Hallmark movie style, the Whiskey Sisters series, because I wanted to write like smart, sassy Hallmark movie type things that like were laugh out loud funny and not just again formulaic. I wanted to do it bigger and better. And those went pretty well, and I got an agent. Um, and then I decided I wanted to break out because you write so many romances. It's like mystery is the same thing. I think there's a pattern to it. It's what we love about these things is that you want your happy ending. If you're reading something like a romance, you want a happy ending. If you're reading a cozy mystery, you want your body, but you don't want to know too much about the body. You want some twists and turns. So I thought I want to do something without rules, without those beats to follow. I don't want to necessarily have a clear-cut happy ending. I want it to be more ambiguous. I want to give people things to talk about and think about and digest and debate, things that maybe I'm not even sure about the resolution of at the end of the book, because this is something I would want to discuss. So I started writing women's fiction, and I actually wrote a book before Familia. And that's what I signed. My agent signed me on that book, and we went on submission. She sent it out to different publishers, hoping one of them would buy it, and that was in February of 2020. And then March, we were in lockdown, and everything came to a screeching halt. And that manuscript just never saw the light of day. It's still sitting in a drawer somewhere. Um, but then Familia did okay, and that was a two-book deal. So After the Ocean came, and now I have a third book that is on submission now. We're hoping a publisher will pick up that one, and I'll start because now I'm out of contract. That I finished those two books, and so I have one on submission. And I've just started writing another one because I describe it this way with the depression and the anxiety and the writing. There's a certain kind of shark that keeps moving in the water and never stops moving because that's how the water going across its gills is how it gets the oxygen it needs. I said that's what I never stop writing because it's the only thing that kind of keeps the depression and anxiety at bay. So as long as I have ideas, I'm just gonna keep writing and writing and writing and writing. So that in a really big nutshell is my journey. My writing journey was never a plan, but I'm so glad. And eventually, as I transition towards retiring from the radio, I'm hoping to be a full-time writer as I move into my pre-retirement years and well into retirement because I love it. It's just it's a lot of fun.
So wait, when did After the Ocean came out? That just came out recently?
That just came out Christmas Eve. Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
so that's still relatively new. So that's great.
Oh,
Can
brand new. Yeah. Yeah.
you share a
Yeah.
little about it? Or I mean, I haven't read it yet. I know I'm sure a lot of the others haven't read it yet
Yeah,
either.
no, it's a fun one. It's that one actually incorporates my music background. Because and I'll just give just nutshell without giving too much of that one. I don't know if you remember, it was maybe 20 years ago, but it was a big news story. The newlyweds who went on a cruise, this George and Jennifer Smith, they went on a cruise, their Mediterranean honeymoon, and he went overboard. And there was like some blood smears on the rail outside of their cabin, on the deck, and they never found him. And there was some question like, was Jennifer involved? She settled with the cruise company for a lot of money. They were only married for like a week. And she did remarry like a couple of years later. It wasn't like the day after, but I think the family was kind of suspicious, but it was like it was one of those Dateline NBC stories that broke. So that kind of kicked off the idea for After the Ocean. And that's where that story begins. A woman wakes up in her cabin on her honeymoon cruise and her husband is gone. She's absolutely gone. And his family thinks that she had something to do with it. And then that goes back and forth to what happens there. And then fast forward 30 years later, where she is, what happens when he maybe somebody sees him, so is it him? Is it not? And what is the implications of this and her family who knew nothing about this past event. So that's kind of where After the Ocean starts. But it happens off the cruise thing happens off the coast of Puerto Rico. So our detective Miguel goes out and is doing the inspection of that. He's doing the investigation, and then David Rania will pop in here and there later because at this point it's a bit late. It's like 5 years after the events of Familia. Part of it takes place 5 years after. And so Rania has become well established as like a cold case, the go-to guy for cold cases in the Caribbean. So he pops up in that capacity. He's really irritated because he's become like this romanticized figure of a guy who like spends his nights toiling away looking for the lost and the missing, and he's really grumpy about it. So it's kind of fun. It was fun to bring those guys back and also see Miguel when he was younger too, before he got involved with the Mariana Ruiz case. So seems kind of like a newbie-ish detective. So
That's really good. I was wondering if you could also share, I'd love to hear like book recommendations or anything that you read recently that you really
yeah, Remarkably Bright Creatures
liked.
was the last thing I read. I'm in a book club. Um, they adopted me after I came to speak to them about Reverie, Rhapsody, and Requiem. They brought me 3 months in a row. And then I was out of books at that point. And they asked me, I told my husband, I'm like, oh, I'm sad. I don't get to go back. So when I was there for the last time, they asked me if I would stay. And that was like, I don't know, 9 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Um, but we do this cool thing. Every year, one woman in the group has a house out in Montauk, kind of a big house. And so we do a sleepover in December. We do our annual sleepover. We all bring our pajamas and spend the day tooling around Montauk and eating a lot of food. And everybody brings a book that they want to read in the following year. And we wrap up the book and we all exchange the books. And those are like, there are 8 of us. So there are 8, those are the 8 of the 12 books. Well, actually, we never do get 12 because we're not every month really. But those are the 8 books that we'll read for the coming year. Everybody picks one and everybody goes home with a hard copy of one of the books. And so we always get this crazy mix, never duplicates, always biography, nonfiction, fiction, romance, thriller, all this stuff. So, Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt was our last read. And if you haven't read that, it's spectacular. Uh, about an orange octopus named Marcellus who gets out of his tank and walks around the aquarium and makes friends with the woman who cleans. So great. I think I have, when the news is difficult around us, when there's a lot of things happening, tragedy and a lot of upheaval, and people are tense about elections, and there's just no such thing as a slow news cycle anymore. There just isn't, no such thing. So I find that kind of sends my anxiety into overdrive. So I don't want to read a stressful book, quite frankly. And there are books that I will pass on in our group because I have enough stress in real life. I don't necessarily want to read an edge of my seat thriller. I'm sorry, I don't want to read a Holocaust book. I just can't. I don't have it in me. So Remarkably Bright Creatures was just, it was wonderful. It had heart. It was funny. That was a really, oh, your fave book too. Yeah, I loved it. That's my favorite recent read. And actually, they're talking about my book this week. And the last one we read was the Heaven and Earth Grocery Store,
Oh,
which, yeah, which was great. A little, yeah, there was a lot of debate on that one in our book club. It was good. It wasn't as clear-cut, joyful read that I found from Remarkably Bright Creatures, but just a lot of really fabulous books being written right now. You can't go wrong with a lot of them. So I wish I had more time, but I also have friends who write who kind of dump their stuff on me to read. So not enough hours in the day, unfortunately. So I do a lot of audiobook reading. I'm always listening in the car.
that's pretty good. Okay, so now we're going to open up to our audience. I see Maria has a question, so if anyone else has a question, you can put your hand up or put it in the chat and we'll ask it. Okay, so Maria.
Hi,
Hi,
Maria.
how are you? I
Hi,
love the
Maria.
book. Again,
Thank you.
I did the audiobook, Frankie, Rob, and Victoria, the three
Weren't they
narrators.
amazing? They were
They were great.
amazing.
I loved
Oh,
it. Yeah, beautiful. Um, I had my two chapters that I liked all the characters.
oh, thank you.
Koki was
Yes.
the tree frog.
Yeah.
I've been to Puerto Rico 3 times. I've
Ah,
been
you know
to
the
the
cookies then.
rain.
You know.
Yes. I've been to El Yunque, the rainforest, and
Yep.
we went into in the water and everything. My kids love it there. We
Oh.
cruised there and everything. Um, Chapter 32, the funny part about um her husband Mateo during the Christmas
Oh.
cabal with the cousins screenshotting. If
Yeah.
anybody read, fun chapter to read.
I have to invite I have to humor. I've got to stick it in and I had to do some foreign language humor like with the old men at the nursing home and she tells them that yeah. Yes, those were fun. Oh, I'm glad you liked them.
Was a shocker when Gabby slaps Isabella.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
interesting. And she tried to do it again.
Yes.
Well, I guess the drinking the night before may have
Didn't
caused.
help. Didn't
No,
help. And
no.
that's when the self-sabotage really,
Yeah.
she just couldn't. I think Mateo says it to her later, right? He's like, you came this far and look how hard you fought to get here and you just like threw it all away. What was
Mhm.
this all about? Why would you do this? And it for a split second, you think, did this like just disrupt their marriage in a major way too? But yeah, yeah, it was powerful. And the fact that I don't think initially I wrote it so that she tried to slap her again. Um,
In the
but
book, yeah,
yeah,
but she
yeah,
did.
but it
But
works
she
well.
stopped it.
It was like that dynamic. That's where you're like, oh, they are so sisters. They've got to be sisters.
I
But
know, and
thank
you mentioned in like chapter where is it?
I love that you have the chapters
30
down. Thank you.
uh 34 and 46. Three people basically, Isabella's grandma and Gabby's dad and Max, they all said the same thing. Pe People can only do to you what you allow them to do to you.
Yeah,
Why did you put it in with three different characters saying basically the same thing, which was interesting, is like they're trying to tie it together, that to tell her it's like repeating the, because I don't know, sometimes you can't stop someone to do that. I mean, I don't
yeah.
know.
Yeah. Well, no, it's true. It's true. And I think where that came from, and I hadn't realized I did it 3 times, but it makes sense to me that I did because that was something that my grandmother always said.
Right.
And they were very much, and you see in the beginning, the book is dedicated to Mike and Crusita, who were my grandparents. And Crusita, she was a very young grandmother. They were grandparents at 39. I'm the first of like 10 grandchildren. Um, if you can imagine, I was 54 with no parents, but with grandparents still. It was just kind of crazy. But that was one of the things, she was the one with the finger in the face, like always too close and poking and like, honey, honey. Like to get, she was getting her point across, and always, and that was a big one. Honey, people will do to you what you let them do to you. And that was something she taught us. It was also something she taught by example. I saw her stand up so many times for what was right, against people and forces that were much bigger than her. And it was a really powerful lesson. So I guess I felt compelled to throw it in, but that was very much a Crucita-ism. And I know a lot of people say it, but in different ways. But yeah, because Max says it to Gabby when she's young, and yeah, Max and yeah, and who else
Dad
says it?
told
Oh,
thing.
the grandmother. Yeah, yeah, that was totally that was a Crusitaism. That was my grandmother, absolutely. So she's there. She's threaded throughout. Unfortunately, she developed dementia before she could read it, so she didn't know. She knew I was in the process of writing it, and she was very excited. My grandfather, avid reader. And so it was like, it was a real, he wouldn't read any of my romance, wasn't interested, didn't like romance. And also he's like, yeah, I don't need to read my granddaughter writing. No, not even the really clean stuff. Nope, not doing it. So he did read Familia, and he said, well, it was a good book. If I like this kind of book, it would have been a great book. If I like this kind of book.
I
What does
loved
that
it.
even mean? So,
New one. I'm gonna look forward to meeting Alvarez and the detective again.
I think
They're
you'll
both
enjoy them. Miguel has a much bigger role in After the Ocean. He's a major character. And I think you'll like him even more. He's a great, and you get to see his wife a bit. She's very feisty, and it's fun. It was a fun continuation to stay in that world for a bit longer. So
but I enjoyed it, and I look forward to reading After the Ocean and
thank you
along
so
with
much, Maria, and I hope you get back to Puerto Rico again soon. I'm glad that you and your family enjoy it so much. It's so gorgeous.
and you've had mofongo, I guess, right?
Mofongo. That was another Cressida-ism. That was her favorite, mofongo. Yeah, which we when we were kids we just cracked up about because just the way it sounded. Oh, mofongo. It sounds like a curse. But it's really on this last trip that my husband and I took. I tracked it down so that he could experience the mofongo and get an idea of what we were talking about. So it was good. I haven't tried to make it myself, but it's pretty fabulous.
Right after reading the book, I'm like, oh yeah. But what
Surprise in it.
the food, see all the sights. Yeah.
Yep. Leave you hungry.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much again. I don't know if Marilyn, Jill, Barbara, anyone else has questions.
Thank you so much, Maria. I appreciate it.
Lauren?
What I will
Okay.
say in the meantime is we were talking about the book festival. I have a picture of us there. I have a picture of my Goldian's author visits that I did, so I'll show it to you all. This was the Gold Coast Festival we were talking about. That was in Long Island in Oyster Bay. Don't know if you could see a picture of us over
Oh,
here.
there we are. Look at that. Yay. I was about 40 pounds heavier. It's like cringy. That's right. Yeah, that was fun. It was great. I highly recommend if you have a chance to do Gold Coast. I can't remember who the keynotes are
Oh,
this year, but it looked really good. And that comes up in May, and there's a lot of free stuff. But if you're interested in any of the keynotes, like I think you should probably put in for ticket. Most of them are free, I think, but you need to put in for tickets in advance. And
right.
there are 2 days of like indie authors who are like out on the street fair there, and you can just, if you're a book lover, you can go just from table to table to table, and just any kind of book, kids books, romance, fiction, nonfiction. You can kind of go and talk to authors and get books
Mhm.
reasonably priced, and it's a lot of fun. Good food too out there,
Oh,
but
yeah.
that I highly
Are you
recommend
going
that.
back this year or are you?
I have put in to be a featured speaker again. I don't know if I'll get a chance to do that again. I'm sure there are a lot more authors. I might not, because I did it last year. I might not get in the mix this year. But I've also put in to do the indie marketplace. I did
Oh,
both last year. I was a
yeah.
featured speaker, and then I think, yeah, we spoke both places, and I had the
Yeah.
table
Yeah.
where I bring out all of my backlist stuff, all the reverie and the romances, and I bring them all out and sell them cheap and talk to people about them, because I've still got all of that. I focus on the main ones are Familia and After the Ocean right now, but I've still got all these fun. That's After the Ocean is my 13th published book. So I've got a bit of a backlist. And if you do Amazon, everything is in Kindle Unlimited too, my entire backlist. If you do like the $10 a month Kindle Unlimited, yeah, you can go in and read like anything anything I've written, just in that batch. It's a lot of fun. I have a very similar voice in all of it, but yeah. But also if you started with Reverie and went all the way up to After the Ocean, you'd definitely see my growth. You'd see how I've gotten to be a better writer, thankfully, as time has gone by.
Did anyone else have any other questions or?
Probably not because I talked so much.
No, but that's okay. I guess it makes it easier for everyone because like, oh, yeah.
Thank you so much for picking this book to read and for having me. I really appreciate it. I love to talk to folks who read, especially book clubs and libraries and stuff. It's just it's so important. And you know, the fact that you would take the time. There's so many books. The fact that you take the time to read mine, I'm really very grateful for. You're doing author. You're really doing a lot to support authors when you check out the books and read them and talk about them. It's a huge thing that we probably don't thank readers for enough. So thank you.
Oh,
Did you choose the covers? Did Lauren,
I
did
did
you choose the cover?
not.
Oh,
No,
okay.
I did not. And I wasn't sure how that was going to go. The first with the Familia cover, I looked at and I was like, well, it's pretty. I'm not nuts about the color. And I asked my agent, I was like, do you think we can get them to tweak the cover? She's like, no, 25 people had to sign off on that cover before it got to you. No. So, but then After the Ocean is interesting. And just say quick, actually, After the Ocean was meant to be a much closer connected book. In fact, it was originally called Turistas, tourists. And if you have read After the Ocean, or when you do, you'll see that there's a lot of mention. The husband who's missing is he's referred to constantly as the turista throughout the book. And the cover was much. It was another profile picture of a woman, I think, in the ocean, and it was much more artistic, like Familia. But they changed the name. In the spring. They changed the name because they felt like After the Ocean might have more appeal, general appeal than Turistas, that it was a little too much of a foreign word. Familia, at least it's very obvious what it is. It's not everybody's going to get Turistas. And then they changed the cover to, then I got to pick from like 10 covers they put together and I got to cast my vote anyway. At the end of the day, when you sign a contract, you kind of sign away a lot of decisions and you kind of have to be good with that when you go in. So I figure they know better than I do. Um, so we'll see. But yeah, but I've been happy overall, very, very happy with the covers. They did very well by me. That's Kensington is my publisher. They have done a great job with the books. So
So if anyone wants to keep in touch, if you learn more about your books, with where you're gonna be, like they want to meet you, social media and website and stuff like that.
yeah, laurenrico.com. I don't have any current events happening at the moment. It was kind of a nutty holiday season, so I haven't done too much. But yeah, I've got current events there. I have a newsletter there. I give away a book every month, not my own books, but I give away other people's books every month.
That's great. Sorry about that. That's our announcement
Oh,
for
that is time to close. That is time to get your books and get out, right?
oh, but
Yeah.
it's like just to get people in that kind of like
Yeah. So there that also I'm on Facebook and the format formerly known as Twitter and Instagram. And I'm on TikTok, but I don't do anything on TikTok because those people scare me. But mostly, Lauren Rico author is my handle on pretty much everything. X, I'm at the Lauren Rico because there you don't get enough letters to do Lauren Rico author. But all that's also if you go to laurenrico.com, it'll have it there. And you'll see all the books that I've written and see if that's anything that's interesting to you. And it might even be samples and stuff. And certainly in Amazon, there's like I think you can read like the first 10% of pretty much anything I've written and see if it's anything that you might, be interested in. But yeah, I hope you have a chance to check out After the Ocean. If you enjoyed Familia, I think you'll definitely enjoy After the Ocean. But I would be interested to know, please drop me a note,
oh,
afterwards. And
sure.
and if you have a chance, please do, leave a review or some stars, good, bad, whatever, as long as it's not mean. It means a lot to get a review on Amazon or Goodreads or Barnes and Noble or wherever, you want to leave a book reviews for any author. I would say it, you might not think it makes a big difference, but it really does. Every single review makes a big difference. But please do be kind. Some people are very mean and it makes me want to cry. So,
I know that's not right. So again, thank you so much, Warren, for doing the virtual author visit Westbury. We all enjoyed hearing from you, talking with you. And just to let everybody know, our next virtual author visit, as we're doing it every other month, is with author Nancy Johnson, and this is her second novel, People of Means, and it's going to be on Wednesday, April 9th at 7 p.m. And you can register on the website. So good night to Warren and all our attendees. Take care and thank you for attending.
Thank you so much for having me, everybody. Take care and have a wonderful rest of the winter. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.